You assume that a word is a sound you control. You treat language as a tool you use to persuade, defend, or describe. You seek a word that can open what you call heaven, as if access were a matter of correct phrasing. Yet Abdul Qadir Gilani challenged this assumption. He taught that the decisive word is not an utterance, but a realization. It is not addressed to the world, but to awareness. He said the word opens heaven because it aligns you with what already is, not because it changes what is outside you. If heaven is correspondence with truth and not a place gained by performance, then what kind of word could be spoken without sound and still be heard? You notice how often you speak in order to feel secure. You explain to confirm yourself. You repeat beliefs to keep doubt away. The more you assert, the more fragile the assertion becomes. Abdul Qadir observed that speech used as defense cannot deliver certainty. It only postpones the encounter with uncertainty. Doubt appears not to destroy you, but to remove the need for display. If the longing for a decisive word is driven by insecurity, then the search is misdirected. The question shifts. Is the word a proof you can present, or a recognition that ends the need to present? Which silence is more truthful, one that fears or one that understands? Abdul Qadir Gilani lived in a world of schools, debates, and formal learning. He respected knowledge and law, yet he insisted that knowledge becomes real only when the knower is aligned. His teaching reached students, seekers, and rulers precisely because he did not flatter speech. He trained the tongue by training the heart. He did not dismiss words. He placed them after realization, not before it. In his view, the decisive word echoes the primordial command of existence. If learning multiplies terms but not understanding, has the student advanced? If authority teaches articulation without alignment, who hears the truth that knowledge was meant to serve? You leave behind the idea of sound and approach the idea of articulation within awareness. A word becomes the form of understanding, not its decoration. Abdul Qadir explained that words either conceal or reveal depending on their origin. When a word arises from self-concern, it fragments reality into favorable and unfavorable parts. When a word arises from surrender, it articulates what is undivided. He taught that the decisive word does not describe God. It allows God's command to be recognized in you. The function of the tongue then changes. It follows understanding instead of imitating it. If the true word names what already is, what happens to desire, which tries to rename everything it meets? You see how the self seeks control through speech. You want guarantees. You want a formula that obligates results. When uncertainty rises, you add more words, not more understanding. Abdul Qadir warned that compulsion to speak is a symptom of distance from what is known. The decisive word cannot be uttered by anxiety. It appears when the drive to manage reality yields to the willingness to recognize it. The conflict is no longer between you and the world. It is between assertion and admission. If the tongue tries to lead the heart, confusion grows. If the heart leads, the tongue shortens. Which order are you practicing when you speak? You examine motive. Why you speak this sentence? To be seen as wise? To defend a position? To gain approval? Abdul Qadir taught that intention gives weight to the word. The same phrase can rise or fall depending on the heart that carries it. When the self occupies the center, language bends toward advantage. When the self steps aside, language returns to service. Then a statement becomes an act of alignment. The word that opens heaven is not a password. It is a consent, It affirms the prior truth of the command that sustains all things. If intention sets the height of meaning, what becomes of speech once comparison and self-display stop? You consider listening as a primary act. If truth continuously speaks through existence, then your role is first to hear. Abdul Qadir taught that the ear of the heart closes not from lack of messages, but from interference. Interpretation rushes ahead of reception. The decisive word needs a listener emptied of resistance. Hearing is higher than speaking, because hearing does not divide the message to suit preference. When listening clarifies, speech simplifies. When listening fails, speech multiplies. If revelation is constant and only reception fluctuates, then what should you correct first? The outer phrasing or the inner hearing? Which alteration truly opens what has never been closed? You ask how this word connects to obedience. Abdul Qadir linked the word to divine decree. Law is not merely instruction. It is a form of the original command within human action. To obey is not to repeat phrases, but to align thought, will, and deed with the order of reality. The decisive word, then, is not an exception to law. It is its essence. It directs the self from contradiction to coherence. Disobedience begins where thought disputes what understanding already affirms. If command is a current and obedience is consent to its flow, then does transgression begin as an argument in the mind before it appears as an act? You reconsider what it means to know. Accumulation enlarges memory. Alignment simplifies being. Abdul Qadir emphasized that knowledge without the word produces endless categories and little clarity. Knowledge with the word dissolves excess and reveals origin. It restores relations, purpose, and measure. You notice how true understanding reduces the need to say more. It gathers the scattered and returns it to unity. Thus, the learned and the simple can share the same clarity when alignment is present. If complication is not a sign of depth, but of distance, what becomes the mark of maturity? Perhaps fewer claims, fewer defenses, and a readiness to let a single insight govern many decisions. You meet silence not as emptiness, but as comprehension that precedes speech. This is the silence in which the command is heard without distortion. Abdul Qadir described silence as the atmosphere of realization. Here the decisive word becomes audible to awareness, not to the ear. It does not cancel language. It orders it. From this silence, necessary speech arises. Unnecessary speech falls away. The listener becomes the condition for the message rather than the obstacle. If silence delivers understanding before articulation, should you aim to speak better or to hear more truly? When the heart is quiet for the right reason, does the word require your voice at all? You test the teaching in ordinary choices. You notice a change. Less compulsion to manage outcomes, more attention to what is correct now. Abdul Qadir taught that living by the word transforms perception before circumstance. Events do not become easier. They become intelligible. You begin to measure action by coherence with understanding, not by the size of its effect. The decisive word becomes a criterion. Does this thought contradict the known command, or does it agree with it? Conduct follows comprehension. If unity is already articulated through existence, then the task is not to invent meaning, but to recognize it. What would your day look like if agreement replaced negotiation? You return to the opening question. You sought a word to open heaven, imagining a threshold outside yourself. The inquiry has reversed. Abdul Qadir reveals that heaven is the condition of alignment with the decisive word. The door is not spatial. It is conceptual. It opens when perception ceases to argue with what the command already declares. The word is not a phrase you control, but a truth you consent to. To speak it is finally to live it. This is not withdrawal from action, but freedom within it. When the listener and the command are no longer at odds, entry has already occurred. What remains to say when recognition stands where request once stood? You began with sound and ended with realization. The outline of the self defended by speech was examined and found unstable. Abdul Qadir reframed the word as alignment, not performance. Listening as higher than asserting. Law is the form of the command within conduct. Doubt refined intention. Silence prepared comprehension. Knowledge simplified into unity. Transformation appeared as coherence rather than control. The opening question dissolved. The word that opens. Heaven is not found by searching for syllables, but by consenting to what is true. When consent becomes steady, thought rests. From that rest, necessary language returns, brief and sufficient.